My mom passed away 15 years after Lee. And I do believe my mom wasn't supposed to know Lee's truth. So that was part of the reason why the timing all just seemed right. I found Lee's ashes in my mom's closet. And then I was like, the promise I made to Lee. Maybe I'll go find the burial spots of her husband and son, the story she told us, and then put her ashes with them so she could rest in peace with them. Pull it all together, full circle. In that endeavor, I found nothing on them. I found no husband ever. I found no dead son, no nothing. And I found a whole nother existence and a whole nother story.
Hey, 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 thanks for joining me, folks. My name's Chuck, and you are here at Amazing People, Amazing Things. So thanks for joining me. If this is your first time, welcome. If you're a repeat person, thank you very much. And please remember to like, share, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. All right, now that that's out of the way, my guest today is Sandra Schnakenburg. So Sandra, Sandra, Schnakenburg, Schnakenburg. So sandraschnakenburg.com. I'll make sure that I put it in the show notes because that's very important. That's where you're going to go to find out more information about her. Now we're going to talk about her book. She has written a memoir, and folks, it's not just a memoir. It really is a story with twists and turns. I don't want to say there's a plot because it's not that type of a story, because it is a memoir. The memoir is called The Housekeeper's Secret. So before we get into it, let me remind you, if you are a pet owner, please be responsible to have your pets spayed or neutered. All right, let's go.
Part of me wants to help others tell their story, or show them the way to do it in different tools I used. We all have to tell our own story ultimately, because that's the experience for memoir. It has to come from our own heart. I mean, you can't really tell somebody to tell your emotional journey. But I can tell you, I did wish I had somebody like that, but then I said, no, I'm going to learn this. I'm going to figure it out. And I think that that's where I have the tools and the guidance that I can give other people to go right to it. Because by the time I found those tools, years went by. And I think there's ways to shortcut it. There's ways to get right to it, what things they need to know. And there's also, I wrote the book about 10 different times, like 10 different ways. I was experimenting in writing because I didn't know which way was the best way to write it.
The Housekeeper's Secret is the name of the book.
Yes.
Before we really get into that, I want to find out from you, because you've done this, how important is it for people to know their lineage or their history, a memoir to pass on?
Well, I think that's the best gift they could give their, legacy is a story, because story lives on through generation to generation. And I remember Viola Davis said in her Oscar-winning speech in 2017, she was talking about how, exhume the bodies, exhume the stories. They're all there. The people in the graveyard have all those stories that are untold. Let's get out there and tell them. And that motivated me to get this book done, because I know that there are stories that need to go out in the world to touch hearts, to change people, because it's through story that we grow and we learn, and we also repeat stories, and that's how we identify with them. So one of the motivations I had was, like, I was having an exercise and writing class that said we were going to write our own obituaries. And I was like, oh, my obituary basically was like, yeah, I wanted to write the story that I would promise our housekeeper I would write, but I never finished. And it was just sad. And then I realized the statistic was 97% of people who start their story never finish.
Wow.
So I didn't want to be that statistic. I just said, whatever it takes at this point, I want to be that 3%.
Well, mentioning Viola Davis and writing memoirs and lineage and things like that, have you ever heard of a movie called Enemy Mine with Dennis Quaid and Louis Gossett Jr.?
No.
I don't. All right, here's a spoiler alert, you guys. So the alien creature is dying, but he wants to pass along his lineage, hundreds of years worth of lineage, to this human who doesn't know the capacity, who can't do it, but must learn because there's a promise that he made to him.
Yes. I love that.
Yeah, again, it's called Enemy Mine, but that's why I want to find out from you, how important was it for your housekeeper, for you to pass on this information, whether it be good or bad, because it sounds like there's a lot of twists and turns,
Mhm.
good and bad in her story.
Mhm. Well, one of the interesting things about her asking me on our deathbed to write her story is that I didn't know her story. So I
Hmm.
was agreeing to something I didn't know what I was agreeing to at all. And I just knew Lee from the first day she walked in our house, which was 30 years of her life. But it was a story that she was just simple and she was our lovely, the light that she brought in was beautiful. She just, helped our family in so many ways. And now I know we were her saving grace, her second chance. So I do feel that this story gives legacy to her loved ones that are still around.
Hmm.
And it also to her life, it completes her life because there was a whole part of her life she fabricated, who she was and her past, her name, her birthday. We didn't, for 30 years, she was the closest thing to us, and she was not anything she told us she was. Even the story she came with said she lost her husband and son in a car accident, but that wasn't true either. So
But
we
wow.
believed all of it, and that's okay because now I understand why. But this is what story does. She wanted the story in the world. She wanted the true story, and she knew I would figure it out sooner or later.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Well, that's the interesting thing is you're mentioning that she was with you for 30 years,
Yeah.
but you didn't know her real story. And I would bet that there's so many people out there right now that have friends of 30 years, but they don't really know their story.
That's so interesting because, I have this saying, like, we often don't truly know the people we love the most.
Hmm.
We could be married to somebody or some people in our life, we don't know like some things about them. And for Lee, we loved her so much, but we really didn't know what she had endured. And it was such a dark, traumatic past that when we saw the contrast to what she had with us versus what she had in her past, it was it was like she was born again. She became a part of our family, and there was so much love and laughter and joy. And she brought that in our family because we had a troubled family, complicated, chaotic. We had a narcissistic father, verbal abusive. All of us were broken down to bits, and she came in to lift us all up.
And, I think you kind of touched on this early on about, in these stories, these memoirs of others, there's something that I think that we can all take away,
Mhm.
and it'll probably help us not only like Lee's family
Right.
from your book,
Right.
from the memoir, but those who are reading it. Um, how important and how real is that?
Well, that's a really good point because we have a universal effect to this story. There's a universal theme. It's, how does somebody in such a dark place become a light for another family? And this is just saying it's not what happens to us in life that matters. It's what we do with what happens to us. Lee went to great extremes to reinvent herself, but many people out there suffer trauma and devastating trauma indeed. They lose children, they lose, much that they have, financial. And what we do with that is we pick ourselves up again and we figure out just one day at a time, one step at a time, and we can help other people. Through our pain, we can turn it around and help other people heal. And I think that's a beautiful way that the story breathes into the world is that Lee always wanted to be a light for others and do good for others. And in a way, like we thought of her as Lee, she was always
Hmm.
family. We loved her. She was a part of us, but we never knew what she had endured until the discovery happened years later.
But was it something that you saw in her in that story that you could relate to, that you wanted to get out?
Well, I didn't know her story when she asked
Mm-hmm.
me to write her story.
Mm-hmm.
So I put it on the side and I lived my life. I had twins. I lived in Australia. I was working in corporate finance. My life was super busy. My mom passed away 15 years after Lee. And I do believe my mom wasn't supposed to know Lee's truth. So that was part of the reason why the timing all just seemed right. I found Lee's ashes in my mom's closet. And then I was like, the promise I made to Lee. Maybe I'll go find the burial spots of her husband and son, the story she told us, and then put her ashes with them so she could rest in peace with them. Pull it all together, full circle. In that endeavor, I found nothing on them. I found no husband ever. I found no dead son, no nothing. And I found a whole nother existence and a whole nother story.
Wow. So you really did some investigative work really to
Mhm.
put this story together.
Well, yeah, I kind of, I believe like Lee's on the other side. My mom was on the other side. I believe I had some guidance from above
Mhm.
because it was serendipitous how I ended up finding her family and finding her truth. And then I realized this is, I'm in corporate finance. I wasn't a writer at the time. So I had to leave my job and take writing classes and learn to do that while putting together this unbelievable, complicated story. And it was an endeavor, yeah, I took on, and every time I quit, there was this thing that I couldn't even sleep at night, almost like
Wow.
spirits were nudging me. I would get up and I'd say, I can't even sleep. I have to continue this book. It's got to get out in the world.
I think this is really important that we're talking about lineage and how we can all relate to certain things, even though it might not be, it's not our family, but there's always something that we can relate to and learn from.
Absolutely. And stories are what help people live on. And they plant seeds in other people's hearts that live on in their hearts, and then they tell those stories to the next generation. So story is how we communicate internationally.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah.
It is. Your book is it easy enough to read for everyone of pretty much any age? I'm talking like teenage and above.
Absolutely. That's a good question. Nobody's asked me yet, but the book is actually very easy to read. It's a page turner. It's a lot of scenes, a lot of dialogue. It is meant to be bringing the reader into the story, and it's not like a literary, highly technical writing. I have done writing, and I've submitted my work in contests and all that, but I think this particular piece of work is just tell the story and tell it the best you can and make it, don't show off. Don't, my editor cut up a lot of my fancy writing. She said, just be simple, say it like it is. And that's how the book turned out to be an easy read, but an emotional roller coaster.
Mm. Can I ask you, did you did you get anything out of it yourself? That may sound like a foolish question because you wrote it, but was there something in the story that you uncovered of Lee that you found, um, whether it be inspiring or something that you could relate to?
So that's another good question because this is my memoir. So this story is my journey in my life, lead coming to our family
Ah,
when I was 3.5. So it's my perspective on all the situations in our family with Lee in it, my dad and my mom, and all the verbal abuse and the different things we endured. And then it's my journey. Then Lee asked me to write her book and her deathbed. Then it's my journey to find, the burial spots. And then I discover her truth. And as that uncovers, as I unfold the truth of her, past, I go through an investigative journey into all the depth of what happened to her. And it comes full circle. So it's my story through the eyes of me, the reader. Is me. They're walking through with me
mm,
all of the incidences. So they feel the shock, they feel the pain, they feel the shock, they feel the love. It's not me just sitting down and writing about a housekeeper. I thought it was going to be that, but a memoir is a personal, individual story. And Lee is not alive, so I can't really interview her. I can only tell you what I discovered about Lee and who she was in my life and the conversations we had, and so let the reader walk through that process with me.
wow. Okay, this really is a story, and it's a memoir built into a story, or you could say it the other way
Absolutely.
around. So,
Yeah, and I did a lot of healing myself. What it did, the revelation of her truth, I had a revelation of my truth too. So the story has two protagonists, two arcs, if you will, two revelations. It really has. I discovered and realized the kind of family we grew up in was we were verbally abused. We were all shunned. We had a lot of issues and troubled family outside the perfect, exterior. Inside there was a lot of trouble, and Lee was our like holy grail inside, giving us a hand during these troubled moments. She was the strength. She had endured so much pain. She had found strength in herself to carry on and to give it back to us.
Well, with that being said, would you say that this book of yours would give those who read it hope and strength in their life? Then,
I hope so. I mean, and I hope anybody who has suffered trauma or endured anything realize there's always a way to overcome and pull yourself up and bring light to the world. We are not what happens to us. We are what we do what happens to us. What do we do with it?
that's I'm glad you said that because at least the way I'm taking it is a lot of people will define themselves by their past,
Exactly.
um,
It's hard to get out of
and
that. Hmm.
and we shouldn't. We have a choice to make that change.
Hmm.
So 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 if you need to make change, please make change.
Actually, an interesting thing, Viktor Frankl, he wrote The Meaning of Life, and he talks about this a lot in the Holocaust victims that, he lost everything, his whole family, and he lost his manuscript and everything, and he had friends that just killed themselves during the Holocaust, and then he, got out and he wrote this book and he's about people who survive horrifying situations and lose everything, which Lee was one of them. So I compared that a lot with Lee and thought, what was that? He was talking about this inner purpose, this inner will to have meaning in life. When you find meaning in life, you have a will to live. And when you have a will to live, you want to go out and live that will in a light and serve others.
Yeah, it's kind of like I have having a purpose all the time, and I know this is a little bit different than what we're talking about, but
Hmm.
I liken it to if somebody says, "I'm going to go and retire," what are you going to do? Oh, I'm just going to retire and do
I
nothing.
know.
We have all been defined, or a lot of people defined by our careers and things like that. And I think a lot of people when they retire, yeah, you put a horse out to pasture to retire.
Yeah.
It's you don't want to do that, so you want to have a purpose or continued purpose.
Yeah, a legacy, like you said, the original legacy is, and that did hit me as my legacy at the corporate finance world was just like, everything's pretty much shredded eventually or put in storage and it doesn't really mean anything anymore, right? Companies keep changing and it's all gone.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what did I leave behind? I had nothing to show for my legacy. So when one of my writing classes had us write our obituaries, and I was like, that whole exercise made me think this this story Lee wanted me to write is giving me purpose too. It's giving me, and it helped me heal along the way, and to see what truth really is, and why Lee did live this, concealed past, and I understand now why she did what she did, and how hard it must have been, but here we are, right?
Yep, exactly. Would you say that this would be a good exercise for people to do? I mean, just to not to write a memoir and a story to publish, but for themselves to read your book
Hmm.
and start writing down, not a diary, but
Hmm.
writing down a memoir, their memories of their life.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have amazing stories. I mean, I can't tell you how many people I've run into and said, "Oh, I have a story and I just want to write it. I don't know how?" And I'm like, "Well, there is a way. There is a way. And if you're being called to write a story and write your story, then you need to go there. You need to lean in a little bit more and do some investigation of how to get that story out. And I'm happy to help with the right tools and give people the right avenues and the contacts and everything. I mean, nobody can write that story but them, but they would need to have some guidance on where to begin because I didn't have it. My first thing I did was Google how to write a book. That's how fundamental it was. And it's literally as basic as that. And then I went and started reading writing books. And I pretty much got obsessed with that for about 5, 6 years. I read
Hmm.
writing books over and over again. So I wanted to know everything that went on in a writer's head. And because I was going through it. And I identified with, and then I felt like I was a writer. I was a writer because I kept writing and I kept going through these same feelings. And in writing, you never arrive. I want to just say that because it's a very humbling endeavor. It's like creativity. You always are challenged on the next level and the next level to go deeper, to go
Hmm.
wider, to have a different way of saying things. Even um, Stephen, not I'm trying to think of his anyway. Stephen King. He wrote on writing, and in his book, he says, "I am the most humbled writer. I sit at the page and I stare at it for hours before I really come up with my words." And I thought, wow, all those books he wrote, right?
Yeah, yeah.
It's like you think he just, come out. Of course, he's probably a lot better at forming sentences and ideas flow. But I think in being a writer, I felt really humbled, and I also felt I could relate because I didn't feel like ignorant or stupid about it. I felt like this is how a writer is supposed to feel, intimidated, and then they're supposed to embrace the flow of it and just go with it and be okay with that. Everything's okay. Just keep writing.
And especially if you're doing your story, your memoir,
Mhm.
it's you, it's your writing, it's about you.
Yeah.
So there's nobody else who could do it better than
That's
you.
right. That's right. Nobody could write it. And I couldn't have anybody write it, and I didn't want anybody to write it. And I kept saying to myself, I have to write this. So let's go deeper and let me figure out what I need to do.
And I imagine that there's always, while you're doing that writing process and thinking process, there's always doors that are open or opening.
Yeah.
So a lot of self discovery and a lot of discovery in general.
Yeah. When you manifest, like when you put your mind in a positive direction and you're ready to receive, it comes. And doors do open and people come in that the exact people that you need at the time. And I've had some wonderful people that I've worked with to get this book done and just to help me over some humps, hurdles that
Hmm.
where I was stuck a lot. Um, and there was a lot of resistance. And Stephen Pressfield talks about this in his book War of Art. He talks about like resistance is such a huge thing for writer. It's like a myth for writer's block is sort of a myth. It's really resistance from growing. Because when you write a personal story, you're growing, you're deepening your authenticity in your heart, and you're very vulnerable, and you're pouring your emotions on the page. So
Yeah.
this is something you're offering the world is your deepest secrets in your heart, right?
Again, I am going to say thank you very much because you, I think, have inspired at least me, and if not many other people, to start writing again.
Yeah,
And it's,
I hope
you know,
so. It is something that does live forever, and the book is on Audible too in January. It'll be coming out, so it'll be
did you
available.
do the reading
I
yourself?
didn't. I had
You,
Tavia Gilbert do it. She's lovely. Yeah.
well, before we close out, you opened up another door. So, what does your daughter think of this?
Oh, my daughter and son, they're twins. They both are really proud that I wrote a book. They're excited. They love the book. They thought it was fabulous. They know that I had a hard upbringing in a way. They knew their grandfather was tough. And, I'm sure they see now why I am the way I am. That's just me.
That's what I was getting at.
Yeah, yeah, you got it. And I love that we can give that to our kids, and our
Yeah.
grandchildren too. Even if I'm one day older and the kids, the grandchildren come later, it's like there's something that they can have maybe when I'm gone, it's pretty cool. It's a legacy indeed.
Yeah. Um, well, I just want to say, Sandra, thanks for the inspiration, and I look forward to hearing your book, to listening to it.
Awesome. Thank you for having me, Chuck. This is great. I'm so honored to be here today.
Ah, you're welcome, and thank you again for being here.
Yeah.